Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Raposo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader with Chris Raposo. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming a friend of mine, Elliot Lollis, to the show. Elliot is a senior brand strategist at Up&Up. Elliot, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Well,
I'm
it's
excited to
great.
be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. It's always good to connect with you again. So, Elliot, you're a fellow PR public relations graduate, and you graduated from the University of South Carolina. And as I said, you currently work at Up&Up, an agency that supports higher ed institutions. Give us a little bit of background about yourself, your journey, and why you decided to dedicate your career at the moment to higher ed.
Sure. So I was a public relations major, and that's mainly because I hated math. And so we had that running joke in our major of, we know you're all here because you don't like math, and that is for sure part of it. But I also really loved writing, and storytelling, and I am just naturally a positive thinker, and so it works really well in the PR field, of spinning things around and showing the other side of it. But I actually didn't obviously go into that as my career, and I was a graphic designer. That was my minor when I was at South Carolina, and I was a designer for 10 years. Um, and then became a frustrated designer, which was really based on I was a brand identity designer, and that was based in client feedback and then just not producing the result that was intended, because it didn't matter how many intake sessions I did with clients and how much information I got from them in the upfront. There was always like a tweak at the end of, you're Frankensteining this design, and then ultimately it doesn't look good, but the client likes it. And I had this just frustration of, how can I make sure this is grounded? It needs something foundational. And so that's when I discovered brand strategy, and realized that that is the foundational tool. So when we have your mission, vision, values, developing your brand persona, knowing your right fit client, that's when we can ensure that your design is in line, your brand identity is in line with who you are and is pushing you to the goals that you're trying to achieve. And then I just fell in love with it. And then that turned into, I've done it for multiple industries, small businesses, startups, the hardware industry, and now I am in higher education. And to be honest, I did not think I would ever be in academia, but here I am, and I'm so thankful because I realized the work that I do needs to be grounded in purpose. I'm going to work 40 hours a week, then I might as well love it, and I might as well be doing something that's bettering the world. And what better way to do that than through education, and fighting for equal education and furthering that throughout our country, and just understanding that education can do so much for a human being, and you know expel you into something that you never thought possible.
Exactly. Education is the future, even though people devalue it at the time. But if you are able to communicate its value and the future for the prospective students in an effective way, you'll be able to attract those students that align with the mission, vision of your institution. And then you'll be able to retain them and push them out into the world and hopefully they'll come back as alumni and maybe even send their kids in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so but you're all into branding, and I'm on brand today with my hat and my outfit just to align with our conversation here. But let's talk about why has branding become such a critical element for colleges and universities, especially now with the shifting demographic landscape?
Well, outside of location and academics, students really need a reason to choose a university. There are so many options out there. Universities need to be able to make a name for themselves, to make themselves known. We have the League schools that will always be at the top, and so there's like this power play thing that's happening, and you kind of have to fight for your spot. And just like you were saying, like the value of degree is totally in question, and you have to prove yourself to stay afloat.
Mhm.
So, and more than money. So obviously that enrollment and that tuition is what's going to keep you afloat. But even more so than that, and what is often forgotten is that a college education, just like I was saying, is life changing, 100%. And so having your brand at the forefront is essential, because we need to remember that we're not just getting money from these students and propelling them into a job, but that propelling them into a job, putting them into something that they never thought possible, challenging them in this 2 or 4 years that they're in school is essential to how they're going to grow and mature and develop as a citizen and a human being. And that's the power of education.
Yeah, I see you tour quite a few college campuses. I say tour, I mean you go on campus and you talk to these people that are in charge of pushing out the messages, right? So how can a university or a college just rethinking their brand? How can they ensure that their brand strategy aligns with their core mission and their values? And why is that alignment so important?
By developing them alongside one another, I think is the most important thing. And doing it as a collective team, not in silos. I think we see that pretty often, that these are the decision makers, but your college or university is a whole being, and you can't go forward without having every single one of those stakeholders involved, because that's what makes it what it is. You can't have one without the other. And so I also believe getting a knowledgeable third party to come in and help you with those things. Obviously, you're perfectly capable of doing it yourself. Most colleges and universities have that, that strong knowledge, but coming from a small business owner perspective, it's really hard to do that for yourself when you're in the day to day. And so having somebody with that helicopter view and just kind of reminding you of like, oh, no, this is our mission, vision, and values, and this is how we're going to align our brand strategy is really important. They have to be aligned. In order to attract those right fit students, they have to be aligned, because students, they want the truth. And by attending your college or university, they're essentially buying into a belief system to some extent, because they're developing a pride about where they are. They're pouring money into this place, right? I mean, it's not a cheap endeavor. And so they really are giving it everything. And those things do have to live together, and they will naturally if they're truthful, if they are a true reflection of your university. So, and it's really easy to see when they're not.
Yeah.
So it's easy to tell if an institution is kind of all over the place and just grasping at other things. And then that leads into your growth and retention. So, yeah, that's a huge portion of it, is by developing them together. You're going to see that through your growth and retention, because when your brand is aligned, that means you know who your right fit student is, and that right fit student, not just any student who will pay to go there, knowing who your right fit student is and what they care about, that's what plays into that growth and retention. And like you were saying, the alumni, and then your kids go there and you're a donor, and it's just this cyclical thing.
Yeah, you have to have more than the buy-in of the monetary value, but the person's ethos has to go in there, right? And that lives the brand as well. And that's why it's so important to have those mission fit students. Because I spoke to somebody at a recent conference, NCMPR National Conference is for 2-year schools and technical schools, and they told me that we're in Maryland, and Maryland implemented free tuition for 2-year schools. Now their
Mhm.
issue isn't getting people into school. Their issue is retaining them because they have no buy-in, right? So if
Mhm.
they're aligned with the mission and the vision and they get free college, right? They can just drop out because they don't have skin in the game. But if there's somebody there that's actually loves the brand, loves the institution, wants to go through it,
Mhm.
and is proud of it when they get out of it, they'll tell other people about it. And that's how the word of mouth spreads. And then they bring their friends and their family as well. So
Absolutely. And sometimes that development of pride, like it is a development, it's not always at the forefront. And um, I'm starting to work with a lot more technical colleges and could totally go off on a tangent there of how that works. So I love that you brought that up. Because yes, like that we have that free tuition in South Carolina as well right now. And so seeing that development of things has been really interesting.
yeah. And there's a lot of schools like out there, like you said, and a lot of them say, hey, what makes us different, right? What makes us unique? And then you see the messaging of academic excellence and vibrant campus life that everybody uses, right? But how can a university carve out the unique brand identity to make them stand out?
Yeah. I actually spoke on this with a colleague of mine at AMA this past November. And I could go on and on about this for forever. But it really is taking the time to find out who you are and identify those unique qualities about your institution. And I know that sounds very surface level of like, yeah, I need to know my unique qualities. That's what everybody says. But you can't continue to claim academic rigor and the amount of programs, or we have great faculty support or great research and we're very innovative and we have the best technology and our campus is beautiful and in a great location. There's While those are wonderful things, like they are shared amongst everybody to a certain extent. So you're never going to be unique in those things. So my
Mhm.
biggest pointers on that is asking why. So like we have this quality. Why do we have this quality? Why do our students think like this? Like, why do we see these commonalities between our staff and students? Like, um, and then take the time to get different perspectives on this. I one of my biggest I guess challenges that I always have for marketing marcom people is to be like, how when is the last time you sat down with a student and asked them, hey, why did you come here? How are you doing? What is it that keeps you here? What do you like? What do you dislike? And just taking that time, and it doesn't even have to be students, but it could be another faculty member as well, can be a staff member, and just say, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your story and why are you tied to this college? Because having one human connection is going to tell you a lot, but two is just going to open up perspectives that you didn't have before and start to um, understand why people chose it, finding out those unique qualities, and being able to make connections that you wouldn't have been able to make before. There's also a lot to say about school history as well. I think we kind of forget, why did the school start, and not just knowing those little facts and the story that sits on your website, but truly digging into that. Like, do your research of who was this person, you know where did they come from, who started this school, what were the reasons behind it. And sometimes there may not be good reasons behind it and you may uncover something not so pretty, but then you can reframe things too. When you find, a lot of universities are like, oh, well, this is a really negative thing about us. And so, we don't want obviously that at the forefront. So we're going to claim these basic things or academics. The people at our institution are really special, but those negative things don't always have to be negative. How can you reframe them to be a positive thing and something that's unique to you? There's always an opportunity to reframe things.
Yeah.
Um,
You definitely want to know what the history is, right? And if there's something dark there, you want to be on the forefront of it. Because if
Mhm.
somebody goes digging for it in the news, that becomes a crisis if they communicate that. And if you have to scramble to figure out what they're talking about, right, then your crisis response is going to be all over the place and not specific. And if you take that time to educate yourself on your history and reframe that narrative before it has to be communicated, right, you're setting yourself up
Mhm.
for success there. But let's talk about the demographic enrollment cliff a little bit because there's a shift in demographics there, right? So
Yeah.
the traditional age white undergraduate student goes down, but then there's a rise in traditionally underserved students. Hispanic community especially is on the rise. So
Mm.
considering the diverse expectations of today's students, how should university adapt their brand strategy to connect authentically with some of the traditionally underserved student bodies, as well as some
Mm.
non-traditional students?
I think it all goes back to remembering like your core values, your mission and your vision. What do you stand for? And then knowing who those audiences are, how diverse they are, what do they care about, and what do they stand for? And then find that common ground between them and saying, okay, this is what you care about. And I'm not just going to talk about this because you care about it, but what about our institution can lean into that and pour into you and help you find your right fit here. And so, and grounding yourself in that and saying, I can serve these types of students because we are this. And that might look a little bit different from another institution. And then understanding too that you're not going to be able to serve all of them, but there are subsets in all of those categories. Whether you're um, a person of color or an adult learner or you're completely online graduate students, whatever that looks like, how can I serve them in a way that's connected to my mission, vision, and value and truly understand who they are, what their pain points are, what they care about, um, and what they care about outside of education. Like I think that's something that we forget about a lot is just like, oh, they want flexibility, they need to work a full-time job, or they need these types of organizations in order to support their identity, which are all extremely important. But
Mhm.
like, what is it outside of that that we could serve in a way that we can serve them? Like, what is it that they care about outside of education that we can bring to the forefront and show them that we really are a place where they can find their home in this education? Um, and again, that goes back to remembering why you started. Um, think of ways that you can remind people of that pride. And so when you're instilling that pride, that institutional pride between everybody, all of the stakeholders, that naturally bleeds out and will attract all types of different people,
Yeah.
100%, and give them something to be proud of and want to be a part of.
Yeah, that's a good point you said to communicate stuff that the prospective students are interested in outside of the academic walls. We have a client, Belmont University, out of Nashville, Tennessee, right? And one of the main competitors to them is Vanderbilt University, also in Nashville, Tennessee. So what they have on their website, they have a page that talks about things to do in Nashville, Tennessee to introduce people that come from out of state, from out of the city, what they can do when they're not in study hall, right? To bring them in to see, hey, we want you to have a robust experience, not just academically, but also interculturally. So this is what you
Mhm.
can do if you come to our school and attend here in Nashville. But let's talk about a little bit more about the brand perception because you mentioned Ivy League schools earlier, and there's this academic perception of excellence there. And I sat with a couple of people at NCMPR last weekend, and we talked about the stigma of community colleges, right? And
Mhm.
tell me about the stigma there. And they said, well, lesser than, cheaper, not as advanced academically. So what is the role of brand perception when it comes to personal branding, or I mean, university branding or college branding, and its ability to attract the right people if you have somebody in your backyard that's a more well-known institution? how can brands shape the narrative to attract these students that may consider a well-known school?
I guess fighting the stigma, right, is that perception is pretty much everything for your brand. You have to have a strong perception, because I'm right in the middle too with a client of like they're a technical college, and it's just, we're known as this fallback school, and it's like you don't have to be the first choice all the time, but you need to be a viable choice. And I think that's something that we're trying to fight is, nobody's ever going to be a Harvard, or Stanford, not ever, but there's only so many schools that can be up there, right? So we're not trying to be that, but we are trying to be a viable choice. And I think that comes in with being accessible too, understanding the value of that, understanding a lot of community colleges have 100% acceptance rate. Or even smaller colleges and universities have 80% or higher acceptance rate. Well, that, we talk about that saying, well, it's not exclusive enough. It looks like we take anybody. So that, dilutes the quality of our education and our academics. And that's absolutely not true. That can be an outside perception, but really what's happening there is that you are making it possible for students to get an education that otherwise might not be able to. And so, and college in any form is not going to be easy. It's going to be challenging no matter where you are. And challenges look different for different types of students. But earning that degree and having, it's everything. And so that brand perception plays high, very high into that of just understanding, having the audience, your surrounding area, whoever you're targeting, to be aware of who you are. And that goes back to your unique strengths and values. And so being able and confident enough to like plant your flag in those things and be proud of it.
Absolutely. You want to communicate that you can serve as a launch pad as well. I like the McDonald's advertising where they say they're wanting to be the best first job, right? So you may not
Yes.
have money there, but at least it sets you up to the future. You learn work ethic and they do their tuition reimbursement and they set you up for life. And the same with community colleges. There may be some folks that haven't had a good upbringing, that weren't that good in high school, that didn't apply themselves because maybe they didn't have the support, right? And then later in life, as adult learners, they decided to go to a community college to get their feet wet again. And from that point on, when they got their associate's degree, they applied themselves, they have a great GPA, and then they can launch out into those bigger universities that they otherwise would have not been able to get into. So communicating those success stories is very important as well to work on that brand perception, that it's maybe you're not the honorary scholar who goes right out of high school to that school, but if you're somebody who had circumstances that didn't allow them to go to a tier 1 university, this community college affords them to do so and launches them, equips them to have a better life for themselves and their families.
That's my story, 100% in academia. I was a very average high school student and I knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't have a reflection of that in my life. My, technical college was the highest form of an associate's was the highest form of college that my family had. And so I wanted to go to a 4-year school, but I wasn't equipped or pushed to have those grades. And but I got into a smaller institution that had a higher acceptance rate, and I'm so glad that I did. And that launched me into graduating from the University of South Carolina, where I finished my next 3 years of school. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise. And I thrived at school, like so much more than I did at high school. I, made the president's list and I took 24 hours of classes while juggling 3 part-time jobs. And I would have never known that I could succeed at that. And it took me, I had to learn how to do that, but having those opportunities allowed me to be able to do that where I otherwise would have never had that.
Let's talk about measuring some of the successes. When you do the brand strategies, when you implement those, how can universities measure the effectiveness of their brand strategy? What kind of metrics are you looking for there?
Chris, this is like the question of the century that all brand strategists are like, we're trying to figure that out. Like, what is that? Because, you can measure, um, you can only measure it in so many ways, but none of them can be truthfully like or wholly attested to your brand strategy. You cannot directly tie them back to these results. But that said, you can do some things to measure that. And one is yearly evaluations of stakeholder feedback. And I highly believe in this. Like we do brand health surveys a lot, and we do it before we start a project, and we do it a year after that project is finished. And we see how all internal stakeholders um, and even if there's like external partnerships, how those people align. So we give them the same set of questions and kind of understand that brand health. And so are they on a higher percentage rate than they were before? And gosh, let's hope so, right? And also we have that in social listening. So I think colleges and universities are finally starting to come around and understand social listening a lot more of, hey, how can I look at this? How am I being talked about in the online ether? And what is that sentiment? And so we can measure the changes in that. If we see any changes, look at your organic content that is formed by outside perspectives or your students on their own. And what are they talking about? How are they talking about you? Um, and then just see how that develops over a year time. And then looking at your growth and retention, you know, that has a lot to do with it too. And again, that can't all be directly attested to your brand messaging or your brand strategy, but they do coincide to a certain extent. And so are you seeing an increase in that? What does your relationship with your admissions and enrollment office look like too? Like how aligned are you all? Because again, that internal um, alignment, whether it's through a survey or not, like how well are y'all working together? Have you seen an increase on like positivity in your work and aligning the messages between enrollment and marketing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Alignment is everything. If we package it all together in this episode today, you need to be aligned on all fronts and don't have the silos, break them down, talk to each other and figure out what you stand for, what your mission is, what your vision is in order to get those right students into your institution to thrive throughout the next decades. Elliot, I really appreciate you being part of the show today. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn always, Elliot Lollis. And yeah, that's pretty much where I live online. I don't have any other social media. So that's where I am.
Yeah, I'll tag you in the recap, and I know that people are going to like your content that you push out because I like it, and I'm sure other folks will too. So, Elliot, thank you so much for being part of the show today.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's a pleasure, and it's so great to see you. Really appreciate you having me on.
Of course, of course. You take care now.
All right, you too.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into the show today. If you enjoyed it, don't keep it to yourself. Share with your friends in your network. And if you have a moment, I would really appreciate a review of the podcast. That'll help other people find the show as well. Tune in every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. when I release another episode. Take care now. Have a good one, friends.